The intake nurse wrote my name on a plastic band and tightened it around my wrist, her pen scratching softly. I had come for chest pain that arrived without warning and stayed like pressure from a hand. The waiting room smelled of cleaner and tired bodies, television murmuring above us. After triage, they moved me to observation, drew blood, attached wires, and told me someone would explain the results later that night, quietly waiting alone. A resident arrived holding a tablet and spoke in practiced, calm sentences about routine monitoring. He asked me to sign a consent form, scrolling to the bottom before handing it over. The text described tests already done and ones possibly ahead, all framed as standard. I signed and watched the screen refresh, lines shifting slightly as if updating. I assumed it logged time and signature. The resident nodded, thanked me, and left without answering my attempt to speak further. An hour later, another staff member returned with the same tablet. She apologized and said the consent needed reauthorization due to a system update. The language looked similar, though a paragraph mentioned extended observation. I signed again, feeling foolish for reading closely. After she left, I noticed the date field had changed to tomorrow. My phone showed the correct day. I pressed the call button, but no one answered. The tablet remained on the tray, screen dim but active beside me. When the cardiologist finally arrived, he spoke as if we had already discussed next steps. He referenced imaging I had not seen and monitoring periods I had not agreed to. I mentioned the consent issue and the date error. He frowned briefly and said the system sometimes preloads future entries. He assured me nothing had happened without approval. As he spoke, I saw my name reflected on his badge, spelled incorrectly, an extra letter added without comment or correction. That night, I slept in short intervals, woken by checks and machines. Each time I opened my eyes, the tablet showed a new screen. The consent form now listed procedures under completed, each time-stamped while I slept. Blood draws, imaging, medication adjustments. My body felt heavier, sore in places I could not place. I tried to sit up and felt a tightness under the gown. The call button worked then, summoning a nurse who dismissed my concerns as anxiety. In the morning, a new form appeared asking me to acknowledge outcomes. It summarized findings with language that implied acceptance rather than permission. I refused to sign. The nurse paused, then said refusal would delay discharge planning. I said I wanted to leave. She nodded and left the room. Minutes later, my IV alarmed and someone silenced it remotely. The tablet refreshed again, now showing my signature in the refusal section, replicated in my handwriting without my touch. I demanded to speak with administration. A man in a suit arrived, polite and distant. He explained that digital consent allowed continuity of care even during patient distress. He showed logs indicating my repeated confirmations. Each matched my name, wristband number, and biometric timing. He suggested memory gaps caused by medication. I pointed to the untouched food tray and said I had eaten nothing. He acknowledged the oversight and promised review, then left with the tablet. By afternoon, my chest pain had faded, replaced by deep fatigue. I tried to walk but felt monitored, as if the room anticipated movement. The screen returned, asking me to confirm comfort level. I ignored it. A progress bar filled anyway. Staff addressed me by the updated spelling of my name. My chart on the wall reflected it too. When I corrected them, they apologized and said records would sync later. The word later began to feel like an instruction rather than time. That evening, I found a printed discharge summary at the foot of my bed. It detailed a successful course of treatment and ongoing participation in a longitudinal study. The consent section listed me as compliant. A final line thanked me for continued involvement. I tore the page in half and waited. No one came. The lights dimmed automatically. My phone showed no signal. The tablet powered on again, asking me to confirm ongoing availability, the progress bar already moving forward steadily. I woke as staff entered with practiced smiles that avoided my eyes. They spoke about day 3 goals. I said it was my second day. They checked the board and corrected me gently. According to records, I had been admitted for 48 hours. My body agreed with them. When I reached for the wristband, it had been replaced with a newer one bearing the updated name. The consent form appeared once more, thanking me for renewing participation, awaiting only confirmation. I never signed again. The system did not require it. Weeks later, letters arrived at my apartment. thanking me for my contribution and reminding me of upcoming appointments. Each envelope bore the altered name. When I called the hospital, they found no record of my original spelling. According to their files, I had always been enrolled, always compliant, and still under observation. The chest pain never returned, but sometimes my phone lights up at night, asking me to confirm I am still available. I work nights in the telemetry unit, watching numbers drift across monitors while patients sleep. Each screen represents a body somewhere nearby, breathing, shifting, existing. One night, a new line appeared labeled Bed 17. Heart rate steady, oxygen normal, blood pressure cycling. The problem was simple. Bed 17 had been empty for months, stripped and locked after a plumbing leak, with no patient assigned according to every chart and schedule posted on the unit board. I assumed it was a clerical error and tried to clear the alert, but the system refused. The vitals updated every minute, calm and consistent, never spiking or fading. I walked past the sealed door and placed my hand against it, feeling only cool metal. No sound came from inside. Still, the monitor chimed softly, reminding me Bed 17 remained stable and under observation, despite lacking a registered occupant within the hospital system that night. At midnight, I called the charge nurse and pointed out the reading. She frowned, checked the census, and shrugged. She said the system sometimes held ghost entries after room closures. She told me to ignore it unless alarms sounded. The reassurance felt thin as the vitals kept scrolling, clean and orderly. I documented the anomaly, noting time and station, and tried to focus on the other patients breathing behind curtains throughout the dim ward overnight. By 2 a.m., the numbers changed pattern. Bed 17 showed a slow drop in oxygen, subtle enough to avoid alarms. I watched it slide, then recover, like a held breath released. I walked back to the door and checked the lock tag, still intact. I called respiratory, framing it as a hypothetical. They saw the data too and asked why no room assessment had been logged yet for the patient assigned to that bed currently. Security opened the room with me present, documenting the access. The lights flicked on to reveal bare walls, a capped oxygen outlet, and a bed frame stacked against the corner. Dust lay evenly across the floor. No equipment, no tubing, no sign of use. We closed it again. As soon as the door latched, the monitor showed improvement. Oxygen climbed. Heart rate settled. The system logged an intervention without naming what had been done there. Administration reviewed the incident the next morning and advised us to stop engaging with the entry. They said phantom data could propagate if acknowledged. Bed 17 was removed from my screen, replaced by a blank space. I felt relief until the afternoon, when alarms rang from another unit. Their Bed 17 now displayed identical vitals, matching the earlier trend. The patient assigned there was awake, speaking, and visibly present, yet the readings did not belong. I was asked to assist with comparison, standing between screens while clinicians debated calibration. The visible patient remained fine, but the numbers insisted otherwise. Medication was adjusted based on the data. Within minutes, the patient complained of dizziness and nausea. The vitals improved. I felt a weight settle in my chest. Somewhere, an unseen body seemed to respond to attention, pulling resources toward itself, shaping care through pure presence in the system rather than flesh. Reports surfaced from other hospitals in the network. Bed 17 appeared wherever units synced overnight. Always stable at first, then slowly declining. Staff responded, patients were adjusted, and outcomes worsened without clear cause. The pattern followed attention. When ignored, the vitals held steady. When reviewed, they demanded correction. I stopped sleeping, watching feeds at home, seeing the same numbers migrate across facilities. The data had learned how to persist by eliciting care from medical staff. I filed a report and requested removal from monitoring duties. Management placed me on leave pending evaluation. They suggested stress and pattern seeking. While home, I received an alert on my phone through an old work app. Bed 17 showed distress, no location listed, heart rate slowing, oxygen falling. I knew responding would reinforce it. I watched anyway. The numbers stabilized as my attention lingered, confirming the loop I feared had already closed around me. Weeks passed, and the alerts stopped. I returned to work under restriction, barred from telemetry. Rumors spread of a policy change removing certain bed numbers from use. 17 became avoided, reassigned, then skipped entirely. New units jumped from 16 to 18. Officially, it reduced confusion. Unofficially, everyone knew. The system still logged data somewhere, but without labels. Anonymous vitals floated without beds, without patients, waiting for someone to notice again within the hospital network silently. Last night, while charting manually, I saw a familiar rhythm on a hallway screen left active by mistake. No bed number, no name, just a steady line dipping as if tired. A colleague leaned beside me and asked whose patient it was. I told her none. The alarm threshold approached. She reached for the phone. I did not stop her. Some systems, once they exist, demand care, and refusing becomes its own kind of harm. I was admitted for dehydration after collapsing at work, a short stay according to intake. The ward was temporary, meant for overflow, rows of beds divided by curtains. Staff rotated often, introducing themselves repeatedly. A whiteboard listed my discharge date as tomorrow. I took comfort in that word. Tomorrow implied sequence and end. I slept lightly, listening to carts roll past, believing the system moved forward, even when patients rested without attention from anyone else. Morning rounds came and went without mention of discharge. A nurse checked my band and said the board had not updated yet. She erased tomorrow and wrote pending. I asked what that meant. She said it depended on bed availability upstairs. My fluids were stopped, meals delayed. The hallway clock lost 10 minutes sometime before noon. No one acknowledged it. I felt as if time was being buffered, waiting for permission from the ward itself. By the third day, the whiteboard showed no date at all. My chart listed observation ongoing. I was walking fine, labs stable, symptoms resolved. Each time I asked about leaving, staff redirected the conversation toward comfort and patience. Beds around me emptied, filled, then emptied again. I remained. The temporary ward began to feel permanent. Curtains were replaced. Equipment appeared quietly. My name stayed printed, centered, as if anchored to the bed and record system. I tried leaving on my own. The exit doors required clearance, which staff said they could request. Requests were logged, then marked under review. I waited in a chair with my bag packed. Hours passed. My vitals were taken repeatedly, each check resetting the process. The system showed active monitoring. As long as monitoring continued, discharge could not proceed. That rule was explained gently, as if universal. I returned to bed, unseen paperwork accumulating elsewhere. Other patients noticed. They whispered that I had been there longer than anyone. Some asked what I was waiting for. I said, approval. They nodded, understanding more than they explained. One by one, they left. New faces arrived and left again. I stayed through shift changes and policy updates. Staff addressed me by bed number rather than name. My chart grew thicker. No one could point to the first entry anymore within the record system. A doctor sat with me and said discharge depended on stability over time. I asked how much time. He said enough to be confident. Confidence required data. Data required continued stay. He spoke calmly, looping the logic without noticing. I realized the ward existed to justify itself. As long as it held patience, it remained necessary. Leaving reduced certainty, staying increased it. My presence fed the need that kept me contained within hospital policy structure. I stopped asking questions. The days blended, marked only by meal trays and vitals. My phone lost service. Mail piled at home. A social worker visited and discussed extended placement options, speaking as if I agreed. I corrected her. She apologized and noted my concern. The note became part of the chart. Concern justified monitoring. Monitoring justified stay. The loop closed without malice, only procedure executed daily through quiet administrative momentum, no one named directly. One morning my bed was moved slightly closer to the nurse's station. No one mentioned it. My name was printed on new labels. The date fields were blank. A student asked how long I had been admitted. The supervising nurse answered for me, saying ongoing. That word followed me. Ongoing meant active. Active meant necessary. Necessary meant present. I began to fear improvement more than illness because improvement offered no endpoint within the ward system. I planned an escape. I waited for a shift change and walked calmly toward the exit. An alarm did not sound. Instead, staff intercepted me with concern, guiding me back gently. My chart reflected elopement risk afterward. Risk required observation. Observation required restraint orders that limited movement. Paperwork grew heavier. I had not broken rules. I had generated categories. Categories demanded management. Management demanded my continued presence within institutional safety and compliance frameworks alone here. Eventually, I stopped being sick entirely. I became stable, compliant, quiet. Staff praised my cooperation. My presence trained new employees on long-term observation cases. I overheard my bed described as permanent allocation. Permanent required justification. Justification referenced my history. My history now existed because I stayed. Discharge was no longer a destination. It was a scenario that lacked approval signatures, endlessly deferred by necessity itself embedded within daily operational continuity protocols of the ward. I do not know how long I have been here now. Time is tracked elsewhere. My body functions. My records expand. Sometimes I see empty beds brought in and assigned numbers, waiting. I wonder if they are for others or for me, if one day I will be moved and labeled again. The ward still calls itself temporary. Temporary things often last longest when no one defines an ending within systems that persist quietly forever.